So as Alberto said, I'm Francesca Spagnoli, and I'm the GILL project coordinator from the European Network of Living Labs. And please mute yourself while not speaking. Thank you so much. So a little bit about our project. So the GILL project started in January 2023, is funded by the European Commission under the Horizon Wide Area 2022 ERA 180 framework by the European Research Executive Agency. And the project will last 36 months. We really are the first project that is working on gendered innovation living labs. So a living labs open innovation as an approach to work on gender, but not only gender as women representation, but also diversity and inclusion. As you can see here, we have quite a strong consortium. We are presented with 17 partners from 10 European countries. You will see also in this picture the spread of our colleagues. And what I would like to say is that we have representation from both academia, not-for-profit organizations, so civil society, research center, and companies. So we have quite a nice spread, as well as local governments. And what we're going to do with GILL is to develop this one-stop shop collaboration and learning hub for reducing gender barriers in innovation and entrepreneurship. So we will provide an online platform that will try to integrate what is already existing and working together for fairer innovation culture and more inclusive teamwork practices to support gender-responsive, smart innovation and entrepreneurship in the EU. We're going to work on this by focusing on 3 main domains, what we call 3 verticals. And also all our pilots are working on these 3 verticals. One is health and resilience. So looking from the gender responsive perspective from this sector. Another one is green transition, and finally the digital transformation. What we are also doing differently from what is already existing is the GILL vision to create this pan-European collaborative and sustainable gender innovation hub that we call GILL, is to work on a first fix. So we are working a lot, and in the past it was also worked a lot on fixing the numbers in the institution to have more women, for example, working on at high top level positions, fixing the institutions and fixing knowledge around this institution. What we want to do with GILL is to fix the practices. So really the cultural approach and also the practical approach on how to develop this fairer innovation culture and more inclusive team work practices. So this is our first fix. And our main objectives are divided in 4 main priorities. So we want to work on organizational and cultural change, which of course relies a lot on the different practices that we want to change in our institutions, to enhance professional development, so a lot of capacity building and learning by doing as well, by using the Living Lab approach in the professional institutions, to increase the integration of not only gender, but as I said also before, diversity into product design, technologies, and innovation. And we are going to announce later another workshop that is upcoming in October on the 27th, that is going really to work on how we can develop tools and methods to support this product design on ICT tools from the gender and diversity perspective. And finally, allow gendered educational new practices through our capacity building methodologies. Okay, our target audience, since we're working with the Living Lab approach, we have quadruple helix stakeholders, which means that we're working with academia, with industry, with civil society, and also with local governments, as we have seen also in our consortium. And this means that also when we are doing our experimentation, we try to involve all these quadruple helix actors in the approach, and we always need to remind ourselves that these users are actors and not factors in the process, and that they need to be involved in the approach. We are working with a series of action-oriented experimentations, which means that we have 15 pilots in 8 European countries that are developing new approach for this gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship, to test, evaluate the changes, and validate also the GILL outputs. You can see here also listed the different pilots and the different countries in which we work on, mainly on UK, Spain, Italy, Greece, Romania, Germany, Czech Republic, and Denmark. And each of them is working on different verticals, as we were explaining before, for developing this approach. So we are working on this GILL action-oriented experimentation together with our partners, and we're working on these 3 verticals, but also on 4 main approaches: individual and team, tools and methods, innovation and products, and societal processes. And we work to do this through the pilots to develop new approaches for gendered innovation, test, evaluate the changes, and then also validate these outputs. Our domains of actions, so we're working along a matrix of horizontal spheres as well, which means that we're working on individual and team, so how these people are working in this organizational context from a single perspective, but also from a team perspective. We're going to develop different tools and methods that we have already tested internally in GILL with our partners, but we are also testing externally with our audience. And today, Andre Woodcote will give you a snapshot of some of our tools, and we're working on these innovation and products for societal processes. Next. What we offer in GILL, as we were saying, this pan-European collaboration learning hub based on the Living Lab principles that is basically an openly accessible IT platform supporting the app's functionality through a series of co-design methods, recommendations, services, and tools for increasing this gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship. And finally, next, the GILL Hub will be built on the Living Lab principles. We have created and co-created it with a set of external experts that we call gender intelligence group experts, iteratively developed also with our consortium, and then we have created and co-created it with all the potential external experts around the EU and final stakeholders through a series of interviews, surveys. We had more than 250 respondents to our survey, and we want to work on it to try to integrate also what is already existing. So we have done a benchmarking and a scouting of what is out there, and we try to combine also the important parts of different projects and experiences. Then in the next slide, you will see the modules. So there will be a landing page where you can find roadmap and manuals and what is in the hub, but also a self-assessment learning tool, which I will go a little bit more into details in the next slides. And this will help you to understand what kind of knowledge you already have about gendered innovation and living labs, and what can be improved in the approach by using the expertise that will be shared through the hub. There will be, in fact, an academy session under the Learning and Sharing Hub with training materials and learning opportunities, as well as a mentoring program. So by using a series of different knowledge material, as much as you use them, you will have the chance to book a mentor session. So you will have half an hour session with a mentor on a specific topic that you will be selecting, where you can ask questions directly to our experts that are coming from GILL project, but also from external expert audience and from other projects, sister projects of GILL. There will be also a collaborative ecosystem with a set of toolbox and dynamic dashboards and the visual map to understand where the stakeholders are based and how you can link up with them and work with them, as well as a forum and polling system where everyone can ask questions and create surveys on a set of specific topics that are relevant for our stakeholders. And finally, there will be a repository, so a GILL Cloud with a learning kit where you can find all different projects, initiatives, resources, outcomes, policies, and results from other initiatives as well as GILL. In the next slide, I will show you the capacity building program. These are the topics that we have identified and co-created together with our stakeholders. There will be, of course, a set of Living Labs topics to understand the basics and how to set up a Living Lab, based on gender and cross-cutting initiatives as well, which means citizen-centered co-creation for gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship, how to develop a gender-free language and better dissemination through the Living Lab approach, how to implement gender and diversity action plans, design ICT tools based on gendered innovation, policy development, and gender KPIs and evaluation. And finally, we are going to do that also through a dynamic approach. So we always say that GILL capacity building is dynamic. What does it mean? That by entering to the platform, you will have a self-assessment tool. You will see what is your knowledge at each time you will compile the survey. You will receive a kind of a scoring and personalized recommendation to access different capacity building initiatives to the platform, where you can find also the list of GILL trainings, but also trainings of other sister projects that have already agreed to share it with us when their projects will end. You will receive a set of badges the more you are going to finalize these training materials, and then you will have the opportunities to book a mentor and to get a certificate from our project. This, of course, can be performed multiple times, and you will get new knowledge, new materials every time you will perform it. And finally, the GILL community of practice that we want to build. As we were saying, we have action-oriented experimentations. We are collaborating a lot with our sister projects. We have a huge Living Labs network coming from the European network of Living Labs we are representing as coordinators of the project. We have already created a stakeholders community by involving them in all the co-creation of this approach. And we have gender intelligence groups with our expert as well as external expert advisory board members. And all of this is forming our community of practice, where we are going to develop the GILL tools, the hub, the framework for gender responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship, the policies that we are going to produce, and as well as our working group on gender innovation, Living Labs, which I will give you more information at the end of the webinar. And if you want to join us and you really didn't do it, I would like to let you know that here are all our details. And our capacity building program is not going to end with this webinar. We're going to have a workshop on the 27th of October online from 10 to 11:30. You can still register for the workshop. And we're going to present there a set of tools that have been developed by GILL and by equalsu.org project. We're going to have a very hands-on session breakout rooms, where you're going to explore these methods and tools, give us feedback, and explore how you can work with these tools, as well as benefiting from the gender business model canvas that equalsu.org has created for the community of interested partners. And of course, you can also scan our QR code to receive our e-newsletter. We move to the next presentation, still by me, where we're going to discuss about why Living Labs, how do they work, so really a little bit about the basics of the Living Labs. The first thing is to define what are Living Labs. There are a lot of definitions out there of Living Labs because our community is really working as a single but also different approach in all of their Living Labs. But in all, we have tried to define Living Labs with a single and common framework, and we agreed on this definition with our members. And we actually have currently around 158 members active all over the world. And we agreed on the fact that Living Labs are open innovation ecosystems working in real-life environments based on a systematic user co-creation approach, which means that we work with real people in a real-life environment. We open everything in kind of an open innovation approach, placing the citizens at the center of innovation. This means that despite the wide variety of types of Living Labs that we have, they're working on different sectors, they're working with different methods and tools based on their approaches and needs of their targeted communities. We always try to have an approach that involves the quadruple helix engagement, which means government, industry, people, and academia. And most importantly, all the Living Labs have some common elements. So they work on co-creation approach. We try to orchestrate the work of our users and stakeholders. So it's not a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach, which involves them as actors and not factors in the process. We use a series of different multi-method approach in a real-life setting to involve multi-stakeholder participation and their active user involvement, which means that since the day zero of a Living Lab approach, we work with them even in the problem definition, in the needs assessment analysis, until the end where we develop a solution that can be a product or service until the market's reach. In the next slide, you will see that the quadruple helix is explained a little bit more in detail. So for the public sector, we don't include just universities and research centers. This can include also the central, regional, and local governments, organizations, and all the entities that are working as agencies and public administration. This can be a local municipality, it can be a mayor's office, and that's the governmental part. For the business part, we usually have a lot of startups and SMEs, but this doesn't exclude the large industry and also just the one single individual entrepreneurs and employers of associations, trade organizations, and representative of this stakeholders group. For the civil society, we can say citizens, but it's not enough. Civil society includes also not-for-profit organizations like NGOs, charities, foundations, associations. And finally, for educational research, we also have schools, colleges, and as well as universities and research centers. But why living labs? Not everyone needs to use living labs. It's not just an approach that everyone can use. But you should use living labs when you are addressing complex societal challenges in a real-life environment for developing solutions with your stakeholders, for enabling collaboration between different sets of stakeholders, including all the quadruple helix we just explained, and most importantly, when you're trying to solve wicked problems that are complex, dynamic, in a flexible world, which often involve multiple sets of stakeholders. So if you have these issues, the living lab approach can be really beneficial. And in the next slide, also, I would like to show you that living labs are very much helpful for facilitating rapid iteration and prototyping of solutions, leading to faster innovation cycles. We work a lot with an iterative approach, which means that we always go back and forth with our targeted users to test that the needs analysis, for example, has been done, the barriers have all been uncovered. And this takes at the beginning lots of time in order to develop a solution, but at the end, since the users are a small representation of our final targeted customers, in the end, we are sure that we reach the market with something that is useful for them, and also the iteration process is quite faster, and we bridge this gap between research and market update. This doesn't mean that if you're working with a living lab, you just have to develop products or ICT solutions. Think this also in terms of an impact that you want to produce for societal, let's say, fix societal challenges. Nowadays, the living lab approach has become more to something that is working through the impactful results and not only ICT solutions, but of course, it has born as a concept on developing the ICT tools mainly. But we're working on several living labs, for example, on urban living labs to develop solutions for municipalities where we're not just developing a product, we are developing a sense for the community in order to use this open innovation approach to have results and impacts on the society. But then in the next slides, when using living labs, so it's important also not why, but when, especially using living lab is important to provide valuable insight into how people interact with new ideas. We always say that living labs needs to create a value, to co-create a value with our actors, with our users. So it's important to use them what you really want to involve all the stakeholders throughout the life cycle innovation approach, to be applied to a wide range of wicked problems, which can be, for example, climate change, social justice, health and well-being, education and learning, green transition. And that's why also in GILL, we thought that we need to apply this approach with the 3 verticals. And in next slide, these are the main essential building blocks, which means that we have gone a little bit through it, but just to remind ourselves that this is the approach where we are going to build the living lab. We need to take an holistic view on the problems that our stakeholders have, all the quadruple helix, to orchestrate their needs, their work in this real life setting, and to co-create with them with a series of multi-method approaches. In the next one, this is also very important. I always receive a lot of questions about people who would like to set up a living lab, and they tell me, okay, how can I set up a living lab? How many people as a staff I need to involve? Of course, usually living labs starts as a startup approach. You don't need to have all these roles that you see here represented in your Living Lab at the beginning, but usually you should have a Living Lab manager that is basically the CEO, the director of your Living Lab. That is the most apparent internal role. It's the one that manages the strategies of the overall Living Lab, make it sustainable over time, and ensure that it's working effectively with the stakeholders, despite the different projects and activities that can happen in the Living Lab. Then in the Living Lab, in order to be sustainable, you need to have different projects. This means that you can have different project managers that are responsible for this specific part of the Living Lab work. Of course, with the projects, you can have also different panel managers that are helping to facilitate the implementation and testing of the activities that are part of the project. And finally, a panel manager is the most important one as a role after the Living Lab manager, which means that is the person that knows how much and how many people needs to be involved as users in your daily activities of the Living Lab. They can be divided into different panels of users concerning the different projects and different activities of the Living Lab. And it's also the most difficult point because you need to get users involved in a Living Lab project. Really takes some time. Usually there are projects that are taking more than 1 or 2 or 3 years in a Living Lab approach. So you need to have some dropout strategies and know very well your users in order to replace them if they are getting out of the different activities of the Living Lab. So it's the one that is calling people, users, and trying to involve them considering the different activities. And finally, the human interaction specialist. Not every Living Lab has a human interaction specialist, but is basically the researcher who is responsible for testing solutions before their implementation in the real life context. The next slide, I would like to show you also some pitfalls and challenges of the Living Labs, because of course, not all the Living Labs have only benefits. It's a very complex approach in a dynamic framework. So we want to show with you also what can be the challenges that you can have by developing this approach. There are mainly theoretical and methodological challenges, which are related to the fact that since the Living Lab approach is coming from bottom up as a practical approach, we have still lack of comparative cross-cultural studies and quantitative studies for Living Labs. And with the European Network of Living Lab, we have set up a research working group that is going to try to reduce this lack of data, lack of scalability of results. So everyone who would like to work with us from the academia to improve this approach is very much welcome. There are usually also actors' motivations and needs and expectation challenges. As we were saying just a little bit before, user recruitment challenges are very strong, and usually you need to take people motivated in a long span time frame during your Living Labs activities. And it's not easy to ensure continuous and active participation. So that's something that needs to be taken into account also as a role in the Living Lab. And then we have governance and process related challenges. So every year you need to revise your governance approach. What is your model? What are your providers? Which are the people and stakeholders that will support your Living Lab, not only from a monetary point of view, but also from infrastructure point of view or human resources perspective. And finally, the ethical challenges that we face every day with every kind of project, even more in a Living Lab where we are using an open innovation approach. We need to be very clear what are the IPR's guidelines, strategies, and rules in order to make sure that the work is rewarded to the right responsible for the activities in each project, and also that people are involved through a right approach by defending their privacy, in enacting their user participants' data in the right process. And you see here some references here and there of what I'm saying that are the researchers that have created this approach, and you can find different papers that we will upload also on the GILL Hub. In the next slides, just very briefly, the Living Lab steps. We are working with a methodology. This is a methodology that is called the Living Lab Integrative Process, and it's very important to be understood. It was created by Professor Joël Mastelica from the Living Lab in Switzerland, working on energy and environment. And I would like to show here that we work as a Living Lab in 3 different spaces. First, the problem space is the first step. You need to empathize with your stakeholders, trying to understand what are their needs, integrate them into an approach that is called people-public-private partnership, which means that, as I was saying before, users are actors and not factors in this process. They need to be involved since day zero in the Living Lab to really understand for each specific project and activities what is the problem we're trying to solve. And after this approach is developed by using different methods, we can use surveys, interviews, focus group, but also social behavior analysis. We are going to define what are the barriers that we didn't take into account probably in this approach. So we uncovered the barriers, and only when this was clear and the problem space is quite solved, we go into the solution space. And why I'm saying that? Because usually Living Lab is conceived as a place for testing and prototyping. But it's not just about that. If we're not having clear what is the problem we're going to solve for the community, we are going to lose the opportunity to really understand how the solution should be created. And it can be a product and a service, whatever. So when we have cleared this problem space, we go into the solution space, and we really, only at that point, we create a common vision. We try to understand what is the value that we are creating for our stakeholders, and we pilot the intervention in the real life environment, and we evaluate the performance. It can be that in this space, but also in the previous space, we can go back and forth with the iterative cycle. We involve different set of users in order to have everything very well clear and finalized. Only when we have finalized the evaluation of the performance of the testing and prototyping phase, we go into the deployment space, which means that we scale up the solution and we go into the market. Next, please. And my last slides, we have done quite a lot of analysis at the European Network of Living Labs with our members and with our capacity building initiatives to understand, okay, but then what are the main steps for setting up a Living Lab? And the first one is to define your vision and mission and extract the purpose. What is the value we are going to produce for our community? We develop a SWOT analysis to understand the strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities that our Living Lab can create, also compared to what is already existing. So we usually do a benchmarking analysis. And only at that point, when we have this clear vision of our Living Lab, we go into the stakeholder mapping, which means not just trying to understand what are the stakeholders in general, but we put them into an axis, and we have all the quadruple helix map in very specific terms, like this stakeholder needs to be involved from the government, this one from the academia. We also trying to understand what is the power that we can have on them and they can have on us as actors of our Living Lab, and the interest they might have in order to be involved. Then we create together with them, we co-create a value proposition. We develop a stakeholder journey canvas to understand what are the different steps that we need to put in place in order to involve these stakeholders in the process. And we create the governance model of our Living Lab, trying to understand with whom we need to communicate, which are our providers, which are our financiers, who needs to have a say in the Living Lab. And of course, we review this approach yearly. And only at this point, we identify which are our customers, so final users of our solutions, and the journey in order to be involved. So first we go into the stakeholder approach and then into the customer approach, where we are going to build a business model canvas. And finally, strategic development plans that are usually taken up from 3 to 5 years, taken into account, but needs to be revised, all this approach, at least yearly in the Living Lab in order to be successful. Andre Woodcock from Coventry University, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. And you can see my slides, so thank you. Right, thank you for that introduction, Francesca. For those of you who joined late, or to recap what we're going on, I'll start from the very basics of what the project's about. So going back a step, so looking at the difference between sex and gender. And at this stage, we sometimes find that people are a little bit confused, so it's worth reminding you, we're developing a gender innovation living lab, and gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls and boys that are socially constructed. It isn't just about women. This includes the norms, behaviours and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl or a boy, as well as the relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time in an individual as well. What's important for us to remember is that gender is hierarchical and produces inequalities that intersect with social and economic inequalities, such as age, such as ethnicity, poverty, things like that. If we refer to sex, then it's the physical differences between people who are male, female, or intersex. And this is set at, assigned sex is set at birth, and it's called natal sex. The Gender Innovation Living Lab is looking at gender, and we're taking a gender-sensitive approach. So gender sensitivity encompasses the ability, skills, knowledge, and attitudes to acknowledge and make existing differences, gender differences, issues, and inequalities visible. So a key element of our project is to find out where these problems exist within the innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. What are they, and how can we put them right? And this capacity is reflected through an awareness applied to everyday life situations, policies, projects, institutions, and in a variety of contexts. Again, we're looking at what is happening, understanding what is happening in living labs, in wider ecosystems, and finding out how gender plays a role and how gender influences the way in which people interact, the tools and methods they use, and the products that are being developed. What we're looking at is how gender roles have been socially constructed within this ecosystem and how these presuppose the existence of inequalities and unfair distribution of opportunities. What we want to do is raise awareness of the obstacles to gender inequality, how these have arisen, and then do something about them in terms of developing tools, methods, policies, recommendations to address these. So if anyone is interested in further taking this up, please have a look at the UNIFEM United Nations Development Fund policy briefing paper. How do living labs fit into our approach? Gender itself is a wicked problem. Gender inequality is a wicked problem. It involves a lot of stakeholders. It is very difficult to solve within society, within industry itself. And if we look at living labs, they've provided a validated approach to dealing with current problems. As Francesca said, they're effective in real-world contexts to solve difficult problems. They provide a participatory and holistic approach to problem solving. And we can apply them to a wide range of areas, such as climate change, social justice, health and well-being, education and learning. And these are key themes that we're going to be addressing within the project. But also, living labs offer another benefit to us, not just in the way in which they work and the sort of problems that they can tackle, but also in terms of the quadruple helix agents. So we've got the public sector, business, research and environment, education and research, and civil society. All of these stakeholders are engaged in living lab activities. Now, this means that if we can develop tools and methods that reduce gender inequality within the project, we can automatically and easily spread these results into different organisations as well, and we can have a greater impact in the public sector, in business, in civil society, and in HEIs as well. So it's really, really a very good fit in what we want to do. So what I'm going to do now is say, why do we actually need to consider gender in particular? As I've said, a gendered approach enables intersectional thinking, so it opens the door to the consideration of other inequalities relating to age, education, poverty, things like this. Gender equality gaps have been widely recognised. For example, in this case in particular, we're looking at employment, innovation, entrepreneurship, but you can also look at gender equality gaps in transport and transport poverty in other issues as well. But we're focusing on employment, innovation, entrepreneurship within GILL. In terms of employment, we have things like women, we see facts and figures like women only forming 20 to 30% of certain workforces, perhaps in the transport sector. And because there are gender equality gaps, this means that not everybody is able to contribute fairly to society or will be able to afford things, to take part in civic society as well. So it's not just one inequality, it's a series of inequalities that build up to a lot of discrimination. People may be disqualified from certain roles in employment because they don't fit it. They're from a different gender. They might suffer harassment at a regular basis in their work environment, discrimination in terms of HR policies, and lesser pay. And the effects of gender inequality on the EU economy are noticeable, and they need to be put right, because solving current problems requires contribution insights from the widest range of people. So everybody has a view, has a skill, has something that they can give to help look at the current problems. And we need this diversity if we're looking perhaps at AI and digitalization, green transitions, health and resilience. If we don't have gender equality, we're knocking out the contributions of over half the population, and that is a big issue. This was tackled in the EU Gender Equality Strategy, which by 2022 wants to work towards a gender equal Europe, where women, men, girls and boys in all their diversity are free to pursue their chosen path in life. They have equal opportunities to thrive and can equally participate in and lead our European society. And what we are missing is women leaders, because they face disadvantage earlier on in their careers. And moving back into innovation entrepreneurship, 52% of the total European population are women, but only 34% of women are self-employed and only 30% are startup entrepreneurs. Where they are in industry, they're underrepresented in high influential key positions, whether in elected office, the civil service, corporate boardrooms or academia. And looking at transport as an example, we find that women do face a lot of prejudice and discrimination in the transport workforce. They have to deal with this every day. And as such, maybe they do not have the strength and the resilience to actually fight this and then make a difference as well, especially when you face glass ceilings and glass cliffs. Indeed, 44% of Europeans still think the most important role of women is to take care of their home and family. And this is why it's a wicked problem. We have to get rid of these stereotypes. And it's been found that gender mainstreaming, which has been proven to work, has actually been decreasing since 2012. So we want to fight this and look at gender mainstreaming and use this within the innovation and ecosystem. The gender employment gap in the EU is estimated at 17 million women. Now, we think about that, but that's around the size of the Netherlands when it was recorded in a few years ago. And this amounts to more than 370 billion euros, corresponding to 2.8% of lost EU GDP. So how can we start putting this right? And here we're drawing on gendered innovations, so we can fix the numbers, as Francesca said. So that means looking at ways to increase the participation of women and underrepresented groups in industry through better training, especially in STEM. And we've seen a lot of improvements in STEM through quota systems. We can try to fix the institutions by designing equality, by creating structural changes in research organisations, for example, by reducing conscious and unconscious bias in recruitment, family-friendly HR policies. We can fix the knowledge, integrating sex, gender, and intersection analysis into research, for example, by looking at sex disaggregated data sets and adequate sampling, or we can try to fix the culture, looking at reducing the inequalities within the culture around the innovation entrepreneurial system and looking at the practice of teamwork as well. And fixing the culture is the key issue around which GILL is working. Looking at Scheibinger in 2005, her comments in the forming of the Gender Innovation Project, there is much work to be done. Once you start looking, you find that taking gender into account can improve almost anything with a human endpoint. Stem cell research, assistive technologies for the elderly, automobile design, transportation systems, osteoporosis research, and natural language processing. Eyes have been opened and will not return to a world that ignores gender, and that was the starting point for the GILL project. Why do we need this fixing? Well, the stats don't lie. There's enough statistics out there to show that this is a problem. Our research that we've been conducting in various work packages has confirmed barriers in the current E&I ecosystem relating to the perception of who and what is an entrepreneur, cliques and male clubs within industry, gender bias in funding and lack of support to access funding. Equality is not promoted by all actors, so it's just paid lip service. There's problems in managing work-life balance. Equality is defined as a woman's problem. A lack of women in powerful positions, everyday gender bias, and the lack of powerful networks and role models. Our approach to fixing this is through qualitative and phenomenological studies to understand and interrogate our own and others' work group, and organisational practice with respect to gender-responsive smart innovation, and to understand how the fourth fix and other fixes can be addressed. So over the last 6 months, we've been collating, co-designing and evaluating research methods and techniques to change the practice and workplace cultures through our action-oriented experimentations. Francesca's already alluded to these, and I'll say a little bit more, but these both develop and validate new tools and methods in their own realm of interest. We've selected from over 40 tools and methods so far to improve practice during the iterative design life cycles. This has been achieved through a series of meetings and through which we've used Miro to collect and vote on candidate tools and methods. And here you can see just a snapshot of the sort of tools and methods we've been looking at. From this, Work Package 1, Geraldine, and in particular, has been looking at example and description of methods for the AOEs to use. So for each of the methods and tools that we've been talking about, we've actually put a description of that, where it can be used, and more about it, how it can be used, and the problems with it. How does this all work in practice across the project? To recap, we're addressing gender biases, entrepreneurship and innovation work culture. We're using local living labs to influence practice across many stakeholder groups. And we're addressing the key EU priority areas of health and resilience, green transition, digital transformation. And what we're looking at improving are tools and methods, innovation products, individual and team working, and societal processes. This work is conducted through the GILL action-oriented experimentations. Francesca has already alluded to this, so we have 15 of these across Europe, and we're looking at enabling organisation and cultural change, enhancing professional development, increasing the integration of gender and diversity into product design, technologies and innovation, and looking at gendered educational practices. These are the 15 AOEs. You can see the partners and the country they come from, and also how they feed into macro objectives of the project, horizontal and vertical themes that have been identified across Europe. So we've got things like measuring citizens' perception of gender inequality measures, looking at how we can better design health products, looking at applying PRISI to the design of museum exhibits for more inclusive engagement. The AOEs are working up to around a 20-month, 2-year cycle. They're going through 2 phases of understand, co-design, implement and evaluate. Then at the end of that phase of work, we're going to be evaluating what they've done in the first iterative cycle in terms of the product, the process, their use of methods, and then we will redesign these and they'll be tested again in the second cycle. All validated methods and learning will be released on the GILL Hub, which is the European collaboration and learning hub that we're setting up as an openly accessible IT platform supporting Hub's functionality. And as Francesca said, this has been co-designed across the Living Lab community. So how do the AOEs work in practice? First of all, they start by benchmarking their own practice, their own gender competencies and understanding, and the extent to which gender issues are considered in the environment in which the AOE is situated. There's a stage of pre-planning, using a checklist to ensure that gender would be considered and how. And then we get progression along the 4 phases of the AOEs. Selection of appropriate methods for each stage, target groups and numbers, specify key objectives, conduct work, evaluate the extent to which the method supported better the understanding of gender-related issues and how they could be improved. Then we document outcomes and move to the next stage. I have 2 very brief examples of this, but I must say that at the moment, most of the AOEs are completing the understanding phase of the first iterative cycle. So we're very much at the beginning of this work. 2 examples from Coventry. The first is looking at an open innovation platform for gender responsive collaborative innovation. The challenge is to democratize concept design. We're working on the vertical theme of the green transition, so looking at transport design. The quadruple helix engagement will be with citizens and academia. And our objective is to increase the integration of gender and diversity into product design, technologies and innovation. The horizontal themes we'll be working on are individual and teamwork practices and innovation products. In relation to the wider ERANET, we're looking at the advancements of knowledge and practice on gender responsive innovation in Europe, especially Pathway 1B, advancement of practices on gender responsive innovation. The goal of the current stage is to do a needs assessment and to start specifying what this new design process will look like, understanding the flow of design activity. And the selected methods at this stage will be cognitive walkthrough, bias interruptions and reflection. The outcome of this will be a design brief and a prototype for a new design process, a new set of methods that can be used to engage everybody in the front stage of the design process. AIO2 from Coventry looks at increasing opportunities for female academics to commercialise their research. As we know, there is a big gap between female academics and their male colleagues in looking at commercialising their research. So we want to understand why this is, with the goal of increasing E&I among female researchers. In terms of the objectives of GILL, it will enable organisation cultural change, enhance professional development, and increase the integration of gender and diversity. We're looking at engagement with industry and academia. It's across all vertical themes, looking in particular at individual and teamwork practices. The goal of the current phase is to understand the academic's journey to commercialisation, to understand the current entrepreneurial culture and the barriers towards this, and to map out a support for academics in HEIs as well, and actually find out where women are falling through the pipeline. The methods that we're using at the moment are interviews, desktop research, and participant observation. And again, once we get that, we will start using that information to co-design with industry, academia and business partners at the universities a set of recommendations to actually help women move through this stage. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, please shout out. If not, I'd like to pass you over to my colleagues. We'll be talking more about the progress of their AOEs in greater detail, so you can get a wider and greater appreciation of what we're doing. So thank you.
I have my question on the chat, but I cannot talk right now.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andre, for the nice presentation. And I can read the question in the chat. Will this solely compose of workshops like this in order to snapshot of these sectors in terms of gender equality perspective? So I guess the question is how these action-oriented experimentation are going to work, if it's just about workshop or what kind of activities we're going to develop. And our colleagues will guide you through this in the next slides. But I don't know, Andre, if you want to also answer that.
Yes, I think we've been using workshops at this stage of the project to actually define some of the tools and methods that we're going to be using, but it's not just workshops. I'm sorry if I gave that impression. We're doing a lot of other things, a lot of outreach to different quadruple helix agents as well. No, it isn't just through workshops. So thank you.
Thank you. We leave the floor to Edda Sellin, who is going to guide us through their own experience from the Give In Living Lab and also partner of GILL projects. Thank you, Edda. The floor is yours.
My name is Edda Selin. I'm a research assistant at the Lab for Social Informatics at the Heilbronn University of Applied Science. And in the following 10 minutes, I will be talking about a former project of my institute, and Nicola Marston, who is also responsible for leading the design processes of the methods and tools that have been mentioned today. In the GILL project, she established the GIVIN project together with Michael Amandi and other colleagues. And GIVIN is the German word for victory, benefit, or gain, and stands for Gender Knowledge Informatics Network. And I will today talk about the challenges and lessons learned during this project. If you could switch to the next slide. I will not talk today about the way companies still struggle to hire or integrate female professionals. I think Andri has shown you this part quite well in her talk. And we also already know that academia offers promising frameworks as a solution, but yet women still face these problems like inequality, cultural stereotypes, hostile environments, etc. And the question is, how do we close the gap between academia and practice? How do we best describe, conceptualize, and act upon the problem of integrating gender equality into digitalization, especially tech producers? And if we are looking from a methodological perspective, this touches many other things. Like epistemological issues, contested theoretical stances, and matters of practical policy. And the GIVIN Living Lab argues that the Living Lab research could be an approach that has many benefits in trying to describe, conceptualize, and act upon the problem of ensuring gender equality in digitalization. So what does this mean? Living Lab represents a user-centric research methodology for finding, prototyping, validating, and refining complex solutions for the real-life context. Now, the Living Lab approach is not per se oriented towards gender equality, but there are important starting points in there, like different sets of experiences and diverse voices as a starting point. Dealing with high complexity of a setting and project, and also trying to unmask the taken for granted social practices, like we do with the fourth fix in GILL. The GIVIN project adapted this approach as a research for integrating gender awareness into digitalization or into tech companies. And it has been argued that Living Labs with a focus on gender equality should always focus on creating safe space also within the organization and giving voice to marginalized experiences, and also co-production of interventions. So developing new practices within the organization in a participatory process. And the Living Lab approach serves both as an infrastructural as well as a methodological framework. When my colleagues were starting with the GIVIN project, the first challenge that has also already been mentioned by Francesca when she talked about the challenges and pitfalls in general is the laborious part of gaining participants for the Living Lab. Because my colleagues did reach out to quite a lot of companies, and most of them also showed interest, but only very few were also interested in participating in the project. For the participants, one thing that was quite important was an adequate space to reflect on their experiences. And this was shown during the symposiums that the GIVIN project organized, and where the several stakeholders were brought together, like the different companies they worked with, the researchers, and also, for example, students who were interested in the topics. Also, another part which was quite important were the signing of the non-disclosure agreements, because this was seen as something which was building up trust among the researchers and the participating organizations. Also, negotiating milestones turned out to be quite an important method because this was seen as a form of commitment. And now I would like to talk about the associated issues which take place in a cultural context involving people with a multiplicity of identities. Because what else was found within the project? Well, the corporate culture differs quite a lot depending on sector, industry, region, and company size. But HR can be seen as a self-critical driver for changes. And one quote from an interview with an HR employee during the project was the following: "We achieved much in the last time, but there's still a lot to do." And what was considered to be a very huge step forward in this organization was the establishment of flexible work time for the employees. The GILL project also identified the problems, which you can see in the next slide, Alberto, the problem of companies to find qualified labor. And this they found out when they compared the insights out of the organizations with reviews they asked students to do regarding the same organizations. And there's one huge benefit that the participation in the Living Lab can give the companies, because this is quite a huge network. And in the next slide, I talk about the reflection on future research, because as always, the methods must be adapted to the field. Some did not work out quite as expected. In the case of the GILL project, the field notes weren't as insightful as hoped, but through interviews, the project gained an in-depth insight into the organization. And sometimes the prepared interview guide wasn't even needed because several women were really relieved to be able to express themselves. And one example was that an employee talked for like around 2 hours in a narrative interview style, and they didn't even go through the prepared interview guide. What still could be enhanced is the network, because the GILL project would have liked to include even more stakeholders and through that make a huge impact and introduce scientific solutions. And in my last slide, I want to talk about the overall recommendation from the GILL project, because to install living labs as a research infrastructure for gender and talk problems, there are very complex problems, as we've heard quite often today, and they need some real social innovations that are implemented in the organizations ASAP, because as Andre said, we are still seeing these problems. So the Living Lab approach can be used as an infrastructure to support these processes. And this means to make sure the research is interdisciplinary, the research is transdisciplinary. Make sure gender research is applied in real life contexts. Make sure to give voices to marginalized groups and have buy-in from tech companies at the same time to create a win-win situation there. Make sure to start with what you have and the tweak processes, install new roles. Make sure to use an experimental approach, try iterations. Make sure to innovate in both directions. Also from the organizations, the tech companies, back into the academic research and other organizations to refine also like our own processes. And this should not be underestimated, like Francesca also already mentioned when talking about the steps to set up a Living Lab. And I really hope I have given you some ideas of how the Living Lab research method can be used to conceptualize and act upon the problem of integrating gender equality into digitalizations. And thank you for your attention.
So we move to the next presentation from Despina Pezzani and Constantina Zimpita from Tasahal Living Lab. We are going to look at the challenges and pitfalls and benefits of the Living Lab they already have in place in the health and resilience domain, and how we can involve this gendered innovation approach in the Living Lab and the GILL action-oriented experimentation focusing on this specific vertical. Thanks, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for the introduction. Hello everyone from outside. I'm Despina Petani, and I will guide you through what we are doing in our everyday work in Thessahal, and how we try to focus also in the gender domain, because we haven't done so far, but we understand on the way that we are working that this is a very complex and very important issue that Living Labs can effectively address. And as we are working as a Living Lab in the health domain, we are also trying to address this issue. And then my colleague Kostadina will tell you a bit more about the GILL AOEs in the health and resilience vertical. So briefly, these are the topics that we will talk about. You can go to the next slide. So what is the health and resilience vertical of the GILL project? It focuses on the priorities that are set by the European Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority. And the main objectives that we have identified as projects, but also are in line with the European Health Emergency Preparedness, are the early detection and surveillance of health threats, rapid response and coordination of resources in the health domain to address these challenges, vaccine and medical countermeasures. Of course, this is more on the medical domain, and strengthening the European health system. So this is the themes that we try also to integrate in this health and resilience domain. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, our vision was always to try to build things that people would like to use, because life is too short to build something that will not be used. And that is why we try to use this user-centered approach back from 2014 that we have started. And I will try to give you some examples on how our work is depicted on this objective set by HERA and how it can contribute to the gender innovation. So if you can go to next slide. One important part that can help also to effectively solve health emergency responses is to build trust. So what we are always trying to do is to engage with the community first, but also all the actors of the quadruple helix through activities that are interesting for them, but also can give some value to us. So building trust is one of our first motivations. And here you can see some activities that we have done in various places of the city. So next slide. And through that activities, we have established a collaboration and research community for independent living, a community that is comprised of more than 70 older adults, but also other stakeholders that come together once in a while to discuss these issues of independent living and health, and also try to support other resilience issues that arise. But also through the years, next slide, please, because we are based on a university, we have tried also to establish training programs and capacity building initiatives, because this can also help to improve quality of care during various crises. And of course, the gender dimension can play also a very important role here. So we have done activities bringing people together with the students to understand each other better and understand the challenges that each one is facing in order to try together to solve issues for the health domain. And next slide, please. And also in the COVID era, that it was the first test for these resilience strategies of Europe, what we tried to do was to improve this compliance and trust, and try to be close to people with sessions on what they understand and what not, in order also to affect the strategies of our community. And this can also have a very strong gender domain that we haven't addressed properly, and that we hope to do through GILL. And next slide. Of course, we are always focusing on research and innovation issues. We are part of an academic institution, and we believe that by studying the social and economic impacts of health in various domains. So, for example, here you can see the oncology-focused living lab initiative that we are running that has this social factor and is also very well connected with the gender, as we are looking also to gender-related cancers. So that's more or less our story from Tessa Hall, and I will give the floor to my colleague Kostadina.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning from my side as well. I'm Kostadina Tsibita from Tessa Hall from Arcelor University, and now we are going to talk about the main two AOEs that are more related to the medical sector. So, and we are going to align the goals with the HERA goals that Despina just mentioned. So, AOE number 3 is the main goal is increasing new medical devices, healthcare tech, and tech-dependent interventions. So, incorporating tools and methods developed in GILL to improve its user-centered approach. So 10 European champion health practitioner innovators will apply and test the GILL resources during their piloting test. And the main goals and aligning them with the HERA goals, it's the development of technology-dependent interventions that aim to enhance patient outcomes and to actually early detection of diseases that benefits the focus on overlooked health conditions. So moving on to the second AOE that is related to the medical sector. The main scope is reducing gender inequalities to entrepreneurs during pandemics and crises, and to analyze pandemic-related data, evaluate the strategies that policymakers made during these years, and engage the entrepreneurs in participatory discussion to identify innovative approach for addressing actually the challenges that occurred during the crisis of the pandemics. So the main goals is to discuss and develop innovative approaches applicable especially during crisis, creating gender-responsive tools and approaches to facilitate efficient support for women entrepreneurs, and to integrate gender considerations into resilience strategies in order to experiment for the experimentations, contributing to the health systems and the strengthening the health systems. So moving on to the challenges and pitfalls that also Francesca, I think, mentioned in the beginning of the session, but in this part we are focusing a little more on the gender and healthcare domain. One of the challenges that we face in while developing gender-inclusive living labs, it's data collection and representation, mainly ensuring that data collection methods capture the essence and the experience and needs of diverse gender identities. One main challenge that most of the universities, but healthcare domain in general, faces is navigating the complex landscape of policies related to gender inclusivity and legal protections. Moving on to the education and training, it can be quite challenging to equip healthcare professionals and innovators with the knowledge and skills to address gender inclusivity effectively as a whole. And last but not least is the bias mitigation, which means minimizing gender bias in innovative processes. And a great example is implementing bias-aware AI algorithms in healthcare solutions to ensure that diagnostic and treatment recommendations are not influenced by gender in general. So more or less, this is the general picture of 2 AOEs out of 15 that focus on the medical health, that on the medical domain that TESAHAL is mostly active in. And thank you so much. And if you have any questions, we are happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Despina and Konstantina. Is there any question for our colleagues? Yes, please go ahead. Semre?
Thank you for the presentation. Can you give any specific example to this? Like, this is already in action right now, or are you going to start all this? Simply, can you give me an example of this? Thank you.
The action-oriented experimentations have actually started. They are developed in a living based on the living lab methodology. So we have 4 phases, and now we are in the phase 1. So the partners have been doing mostly the research or desk-based research and mapping of the relevant stakeholders. So we are in the first phase, and in the next 18 months, we are going to develop more. And I think we will upload everything, and we will communicate. Excuse me?
Go ahead.
Okay. So for now, we do not have some application or already developed, but we will have it soon. And I think during the capacity building, you will also have the updates.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We move to the last presentation for today. We leave the floor to Andra Tanase from Transylvania IT Cluster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here. I'll try also to be brief. If I were to summarize a little bit challenges, pitfalls, and benefits from the perspective of the IT cluster and also of the Digital Innovation Hub that I'm representing, would be that definitely one of the challenge is being convincing in our ecosystem. One of the pitfalls we need to be very aware of is not only speaking our own technical language in different of the actor, but actually trying to engage. And one of the benefits is the fact that we are in an ecosystem, and with a living lab approach, we are working in not only with the quadruple helix, but also in real life environments. So it's both the challenge and the beauty of what we are doing. Today, I will try to present the gendered innovation approach in living labs, both from the industry and from the government perspective. In our action-oriented experimentation, we are a cluster, an ICT cluster, Transylvania IT, and also a local authority, the municipality of Alba Iulia. So I'll try to introduce both perspective and practices of what we are doing here in Romania, and of course touching upon the green and the digital dimension of this process as it is reflected in our experience. Romania, Alba Iulia municipality, and Cluj-Napoca ecosystem. So going to the next slide, just quickly, you saw earlier map of the different action-oriented experimentation. This is us, and our action-oriented experimentation aims to develop and test gender-based tools at the organizational level via different GILL methodologies, and to deliver on existing plans. So we are building upon existing strategies that we have, and to create gender sensitivity in various areas such as climate, mobility, digital, and so on. As you will see, working on a gender sensitivity, this is affecting all the areas that the municipality works. So definitely the green and digital transition aspects will be reflected, and we try to see how the gender innovation fits into all of this gender smart innovation, this concept that we keep talking about, GRISI. Moving on to the next slide. So just wanted to say that for the colleagues of Alba Iulia municipality, they are quite proud, because taking gender mainstreaming and signing the European Charter for Equality of Women and Men in Local Life, the municipality also created an equality action plan, which is an essential tool to activate gender budgeting and integrating the gender concept, and the corresponding approaches, intersectional approaches, in the newly updated integrated urban development strategies. So basically what we're saying is that the Alba Iulia municipality, the policy aspect is checked, their signing of the charters and the plans are done, and what is needed and expected from the GILL project is the practical aspect of methods and tools to enact these plans. I just came across recently a quote saying that a vision and a plan without an action is actually a hallucination. So we are actually trying to do something realistic and act upon the vision, and not only having hallucination about this ideal of ours that we kept talking about, which is gender sensitivity, which is smart tools for applying gender equity into all domains. So now we can go to the next slide, and just a snapshot on the statistics. You see here the Gender Equality Index. As you may know, 100 is full equality in different aspects, and Romania, unfortunately, is on the 26th place among the European countries. I think Greece is the following one. But what is interesting to see in this index, and is the status that we are starting and departing from, is the fact that the dynamics, and especially the dynamics post-pandemic, is the fact that in several domains, the ranking and the scores of women and versus men participation has decreased. And particularly in the case of Romania, setbacks in the domain of power are particularly important in our context, where we talk about policies and policy making and local authority and gender equality in this respect. So these are the numbers. If we go on, I'll talk a little bit about the goals that we have in our action-oriented experimentation. And basically what we are set out to do is to create organizational and cultural changes, but also to enhance, to support professional development in a gender sensitive way. So both in local authorities and in the industry, as we are working also with clusters. And what also we would like to do is to increase the integration of gender and also diversity into the public domain, but also private domain, but using technologies and innovations. So creating or working towards change at the cultural level, but also supporting the competencies in the authorities and the plans in the authorities to put these aspects of gender equality into the terms of reference, into the attention of the fact that being a professional includes this aspect. The graph to the right is something that just highlights the fact that in order to do so, we talked about intersectional approach, but also systemic and the interconnectivity of the effects of different inequalities, but also equalities. So definitely we're not only working on one front, but the integration of all these. Moving on, so this is what we are set out to do. There are a number of challenges that we addressed, and we addressed in conversations with our project partners. We addressed in conversation with the stakeholders. This is a picture from one of the meetings and that we had with the Alba Iulia municipality. The lack of awareness regarding gender sensitivity and the lack of awareness regarding the impact that gender sensitivity has in the private and public domain, I would say, is the core challenge that we try to address. We are trying to be convincing. We are trying to offer arguments that address the impact that a change in the gender sensitivity behaviors might entail, both in the private and in the public domain. So this is what we are trying to address as the core challenge. Of course, this challenge comes with a number of other statistics, the context, the lack of action, the lack of coherence between policy and actually activities, the different languages that we speak are definitely other challenges that we are addressing. But let's move on and see from the challenges what we are trying to do. These are the different stages of our action-oriented experimentation according to the methodology of the Living Lab. So far, we have just completed the understand phase. So we had desk research, we did the stakeholder mapping. In this, we actually got to know quite a number of interesting initiatives and started the conversations. Then what we will do in the co-design is the policy recommendation and different events for creating that awareness that I was talking earlier. So we will have co-design workshops in order to plan the different events and in order to create the policy together with the stakeholders that we identified in the first stage. Then the implementation what we are going to use is action research. So for sure we're having the policy and we are going to follow its impacts and its implementation in the real context of Alba Iulia municipality. And also at this point, we are pretty sure that we're going to do the same for Cluj-Napoca municipality plan for gender equality. And of course, in the evaluation, we'll have and we will employ gender impact assessment. And we're pretty excited about even learning more about this tool. Journaling or diary will go throughout. Who are involved is just a picture that I wanted to share with you. We have been in contact with these actors from the quadruple helix, the municipalities, but also regional development agencies. We took part in different events, and actually met quite interesting stakeholders from there. The university, the main partner and interlocutor so far has been Babes-Bolyai University. The civil society, we worked with the Coalition for Gender Equality, but also with Patriarch Peace Institute of Romania and the Volunteer Center in Cluj-Napoca. And for the industry, of course, we are a cluster, so we worked with some of our members, but also the initiative Women in Tech in Cluj, the Confederation of Women in Business, Brava Angels, which is a women investor group, and through one of the representatives with the Women Economic Forum, Aurora Martin, who's in charge of the, who's a representative, a member of the Women Economic Forum, and works at the national level on Equality of Chances Agency. So here just a number of interactions we had with all these actors, so with the municipality, with the Regional Development Agency, and here you can see a study that was is part of our desk research, and this study looks at PGEM, which is a perception index for gender equity in management, and it was elaborated by the local university, and we're definitely working with its findings. International Women Business Group, Brava Angels, as I mentioned, and other events. So both informative events and events where we mentioned and presented what we're doing in the GILL project. How will success look like when we'll have more awareness, more intelligence regarding the availability of concrete tools? So again, being convincing, we need very concrete tools and data which speaks to the various actors. And concretely, the two policy papers that we are aiming at are a part of our success. And when we'll put them into practice, they will be even more part of our success. And with that, I say thank you. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them here or in a further conversation.
Thanks a lot, Andra, for this very interesting case. Is there any question for Andra? Clapping hands. Eva?
Hi. Yes,
Hi.
maybe one general question I would have. First of all, thank you for the input. It's basically when you implement such an initiative or like lab, what are kind of like things you also have to consider on the inside when managing the internal stakeholders, especially in universities? Do you have any best practices or success factors in that way?
When engaging universities, I think the good practice that we have here in Cluj is the fact that we have an existing collaboration and we have a level of trust, and there is, you know, these events that pop out are usual meetings where we meet and we connect. So that's why the Regional Development Agency event facilitated a connection with a very relevant case on gender. So having this momentum and opportunities so that all the stakeholders meet is definitely, I would say, here in Cluj, it's a good practice. And then also what always is a good practice is having these meetings and going to these meetings with the intention of having a dialogue and learning and having a passion and real intention about the project. So we like to say that we don't like only to tick boxes, but actually engage in conversations in these events and with the knowledge there.
Thank you. I think there is another question from Semre. Samra?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's on. Again, thank you for your contribution. My question, actually, I'm also board member in Green Collar Women Energy Association. So we are based in Turkey. We've been doing this for 4 years now. So we actually put out our report about renewable energy and gender equality. This is considered as the first report on this topic. So my question will be, I said this information because, like, what kind of method? Because even taking the snapshot like this, it's a bit complex in terms of so many levels. Like, what kind of so in this process, the methods will be developed. Am I understanding correctly? Or like we come across in this co-design part, we come together and just we discuss this topic as the different shareholders. Is it going to be like this, or for instance, as an association, can we participate to this? Like, we are coming from Turkey. Is it going to be a country level, or this kind of questions? A bit mixed out, scattered right now, but it's a general question.
I think it's a general question. I will let Francesca perhaps give the general answer. I can only say that in the Living Lab, what we are doing is taking also some of the methods which have been are either well-known methods or have been designed within the project, and apply and slightly adapt them. So, for example, and also come up with their own methods such as this PGEM index. So I think a methodology or a study like yours can be very useful to bring into the knowledge base and into the platform and into one of our learning opportunities. This would be my perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thanks, Samra, for the question. Of course, we have a series of methods and tools in general in the Living Lab methodology that we use, and then what we are trying to do in GILL is to adapt this approach into the gendered innovation perspective, and these are the methods and tools that Andrea was explaining. But then also all the ones that you might have and you want to share with us, as we are doing in the workshop on the 27th of October with equalsu.org. For example, we don't have a business model canvas that is adapted to gender, so we will be very happy to have this on board, if I understood correctly the question, because there was a little bit of noise.
So there's going to be that workshop, and so everybody can participate, basically, right? No matter what, regardless of their countries, and this is going to be the second. After that, are we going to do another workshops together, or how is going to be the process? I don't know if you hear me well.
We lost you.
Okay, I'm in the train right now. That's why it's a bit complex. So yeah, my question is, that's going to be the second workshop, but are we supposed to also participate to all workshops or all the other code design events, and like we develop these methods together?
Okay.
So my question is,
now I got your question. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so basically the webinar and the workshop we are developing is for capacity building, so to explain the approach that we are using and also to give information and examples about the work we are doing, the action-oriented experimentation. Your question is more about the practical approach in the action-oriented experimentation. So they are developing the activities, now they are in the finalizing their understanding phase, and they will need to start on the co-design with their own targeted stakeholders stakeholders. So the externals will not directly be involved in the action-oriented experimentation unless they are in the same area and they would like to contribute as a stakeholder, then you can join. As far as understood, you are based in Turkey. We don't have at this moment experimentation in Turkey, but we are going to develop these capacity building approaches to support the development of learnings and knowledge. And then when we are going to have the first results on the co-design phase of the action-oriented experimentation, we will share the results on the app. So you will be able to learn from them. Okay. Thank you. We have one last slide. I would like to let you know, as I was briefly mentioning, that we have opened up the GILL Working Group on Gendered Innovation Living Labs. It's open to everyone. It's developed by ENOL together with the Coventry University as one of our leading scientific lead of the project and Living Labs of the ENOL network. So if you want to scan this QR code, you can find the Microsoft form. You can enroll for the working group on Gendered Innovation Living Labs. You will find there several working groups from ENOL, but this one is open to everyone, not only to Living Labs. So please sign up if you want to be part of our community, and we will involve you also in a series of activities for policy development, writing papers together, and developing practical activities. So sign up, and I hope you will join our community. And thanks a lot for being here for such a long time. And we hope to see you also in the workshop on the 27th of October. Thanks. Have a nice day.